And now I would like to invite the U.S. Section Chair, Lana Pollack, to share her observations on the day. Chair Pollack.
My first observation is that people being people, they cluster to the back. And I want to tell you that these people are so attractive that if you would please just move down, you would not be disappointed. So if we could get even anybody to volunteer to move down, there will be a special prize for those who start so that we could feel like we're a group. Ah, special prize to the woman from Toronto. It might take me a day or two to get the prize all, purchased and wrapped up. And for those who are in the back, there's something else. You heard of that lump of coal. All right, it is a great day. My observation is that it's a great day in spite of the Tigers' loss. It was a great season, and we have to count our blessings. So welcome to this session. We open the morning with a very important session, which is a look at the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement negotiations, the progress therein. Everybody in this room knows how important it is to get that right, to help guide, direct, and really insist on a new transparency, a new commitment based on the considerable accumulation of knowledge and the new threats since the last rewriting of this agreement in '87. But before I introduce our speakers, our program, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I'd like to, in particular, thank the Assistant Secretary for Conservation and Management and the Department of Interior, Dr. Larry Robinson, who is here and who has commented to me what a great city Detroit is, and that people ought to know what's going on here, and we're coming back. So thank you, Dr. Robinson. I'd also like to, at this point, ask, and I know most are not in the room, but would the staff of the IJC please rise? We would like to, most of them are out working. Thank you. Meetings of this complexity don't just happen. You all know that. There's an incredible amount of work and thought in the work between the offices of our Windsor office, of course, in Ottawa and in DC as well. We thank the staff. I would particularly like to thank, and I don't know that he's in this room, there's one man who really looks like he's exhausted, and that's the guy we thank the most, and that's John Nevin. Is John here? Okay. Well, we can get started with Susan Hedman, who is the director of Region 5 for the EPA, and since she's been on that job, she has taken the responsibility for being the primary negotiator with the United States team. And Mike Goffin, the Acting Director General of Environment Canada on the Canadian side, has been with these negotiations since the beginning. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mike.
Thank you, and good morning. Is this mic on? Yes. Okay. All right, there we go. During the meeting this morning, we will be providing a brief overview of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the context for current negotiations, and the role that stakeholders and the public have played in the process. And then we'll be providing some further information on the directions that are currently being considered under the agreement. And I would like to say to the commissioners who are in attendance that We are in receipt of your September 29th letter, and we found it very helpful. We will not be specifically addressing the letter in the presentation this morning, but hope to do so next week when we meet with you in Ottawa.
The current Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement has guided our environmental protection efforts now for 38 years. The agreement's purpose is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the waters of the Great Lakes Basin ecosystem. The agreement is the Government of Canada and the Government of the United States' commitment to implement programs to manage nutrients and toxic chemicals that impact the Great Lakes Basin ecosystem. And it establishes areas of concern and lake-wide management programs. Under the agreement, there is a requirement for a periodic binational review, and since 1972, the agreement has been updated several times. Given that the Water Quality Agreement was last amended in 1987, it's not surprising that both countries recognized the importance for reviewing the agreement, and in January 2004 launched a binational review process.
This review was completed in 2007 with a comprehensive public review of the operation and effectiveness of the current agreement. The key findings of the review indicated that the purpose of the agreement remained valid, but was not reflected well across all of the annexes, that many of the provisions were outdated, that there were some pressing issues and emerging threats that weren't captured in the current agreement, that the roles of governments and the public were not clear, and that accountability was weak. The findings of the review process led our two federal governments to make an announcement on June 13, 2009, about our joint decision to negotiate changes to the agreement.
We've approached negotiations in a phased manner, and we've now almost completed the fourth phase of the project, where we're drafting amendments to agreement text. Negotiations have been organized around a series of plenary sessions. A plenary is an official meeting of the parties. The negotiations officially commenced on January 27, 2010, with the first plenary in Washington, D.C. It focused on the process for negotiations and the issue of governance. The second plenary was held on April 8, 2010. At that meeting, chief negotiators worked with expert issue leads to examine the specific environmental issues under the agreement. Between the second and third plenaries, we had several working sessions where chief negotiators met to identify, develop, and discuss possible policy options. The third plenary was held on June 16th and 17th to agree upon the key policy directions needed for an amended agreement. With the conclusion of the third plenary, the binational drafting process began. We've tentatively scheduled a fourth and final plenary in early December of this year. Before we move to a summary of the directions for an amended agreement, we want to review and acknowledge the role of stakeholders in the public in reaching this point. As was mentioned earlier, in 2004, both countries engaged in an extensive public review of the agreement over a number of years. In 2005, the governments of Canada and the United States asked the International Joint Commission to seek the public's views on how well the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement had worked so far and how effective it had been. Then in 2006 and 2007, the governments established 9 multi-stakeholder working groups to review in detail the agreement. As part of this engagement process, a special governance and institutions workshop was held.
Once the decision was made to actually begin negotiations, both governments recognized the importance of engaging in broad public outreach throughout the negotiation process, and therefore designed a binational engagement process. This included a webinar prior to commencement of negotiations on the negotiation process itself and governance, a series of webinars in June 2010 to solicit comments on issue areas being negotiated, a series of binational teleconferences with issue leads from the US and Canada in September 2010, two binational public and a webinar to seek reviews, two binational public fora and a webinar to seek reviews on the significant changes being proposed for the agreement in September 2011. Those were the meetings that were just held in Toronto and Chicago. And additional domestic processes that have been carried out by both countries to engage groups who work on Great Lakes restoration, businesses, and organizations with interests in the lakes. For instance, water, agriculture, recreation, shipping, fisheries, chemicals, oil and gas, and forestry, and non-governmental organizations, municipalities, academia, property owners, tribes, and others. We'll now turn to an overview of the directions being proposed for a revised agreement. We will be presenting these directions under the following headings: what is being retained, what is being streamlined, what is being improved, enhanced, and what is being added. Please keep in mind that what we're presenting to you today reflects the current status of negotiations for the amended agreement. Drafting is not complete, and these amendments will require official approval of the governments.
The core of the current agreement is still sound, and the two governments propose retaining a great many concepts. Most significantly, we propose retaining the purpose of the agreement, the current agreement scope, which includes the 5 Great Lakes, the connecting river channels, and the international section of the St. Lawrence River. The commitments in the agreement to restoration of ecosystem health in areas of concern, and the commitment to lake-wide management plans.
In our negotiations, we propose to streamline the agreement in several ways. With regard to lake-wide area management plans and remedial action plans, we propose to require more frequent, targeted reporting and increasing the emphasis on action and implementation. We propose to streamline definitions throughout the agreement by including only necessary definitions, updating and clarifying definitions where required, and eliminating redundancy. Perhaps most significantly, we propose to consolidate several existing annexes and references into one place for each of the following topics: ship source discharges, nutrients, chemical substances of concern, the International Joint Commission, and perhaps others.
Parties are considering improvements to governance, including clarifying the scope to explicitly embrace an ecosystem approach to water quality, revising the general objectives to include health of the ecosystem, establishing ecosystem objectives that are specific to each lake, and a commitment to assessing Great Lakes science and integrating development of binational science priorities into the management process. Lake-wide management plans will be improved and enhanced by addressing all environmental stressors, not just critical pollutants, and by development of a nearshore assessment and management approach. Canada and the United States are considering improvements to the Binational Management Forum. We propose to improve and enhance the role of stakeholders and the public in the new agreement. And the parties are considering improving and enhancing accountability in the agreement through enhanced reporting across all annexes and a commitment to prepare a binational progress report of the parties no less frequently than once every 3 years.
Perhaps most importantly to you here, the parties propose to strengthen and clarify the role of the IJC. This would include an enhanced role in analyzing and disseminating information to raise public awareness, as well as the level of public participation in restoring and protecting the waters of the Great Lakes. It would also include an enhanced role in recommending approaches and options for the parties to consider in order to improve their effectiveness in achieving the objectives of the agreement, as well as reporting to the parties, other governments, and the public with their assessment of progress toward achieving the objectives of the agreement.
It will also include tendering advice and recommendations to the parties and other governments on current and emerging problems related to the quality of the waters of the Great Lakes, and making the advice and recommendations available to the broader audience. Providing advice on matters related to research and monitoring of the waters of the Great Lakes and disseminating that information to the public. Regularly engaging the public on issues affecting the waters of the Great Lakes and options for restoring and protecting these waters, and making special reports to the parties, other governments, and the public concerning any water quality problem in the Great Lakes as required.
Other areas in which we propose to improve current elements of the agreement are related to the Annex on Chemical Substances. The treatment of chemical substances in the agreement would be improved through a new consolidated chemical substances specific annex that would clearly identify commitments to reduce risks and protect the Great Lakes from these substances. This new annex would also address pharmaceuticals and personal care products and other chemicals of emerging concern. There will also propose to be an annex on nutrients to improve and enhance the treatment of nutrients in the revised agreement. Parties hope to consolidate current references to nutrients into a single annex. The annex would continue to focus on phosphorus control, but enhance the coordination of binational actions to manage phosphorus concentrations and loading so that cladifera, cyanobacteria, and other algal species do not impair aquatic ecosystem health in nearshore or open waters of the Great Lakes. Annex on groundwater would better reflect the broader challenges and future impacts facing the waters of the Great Lakes related to groundwater, including information gaps and science needs. We are considering an updated annex on groundwater. The annex on ship source discharges would be improved so that the treatment of ship source discharges in the agreement would be enhanced. Parties are considering amending the ship source annexes by folding them into a single annex focused on ship source discharges that could affect the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the Great Lakes. And finally, a new science annex. In order to improve the treatment of science in the agreement, we are considering creating a new science annex that encompasses all of the existing annexes that reference science. This new annex would recognize science as the cornerstone of the agreement and would organize efforts through an adaptive management framework.
In addition to strengthening and streamlining the annexes in the current agreement, there are some new additions. For example, a new annex on aquatic invasive species, committing both countries to pursue a binational prevention-based approach for aquatic invasive species, informed by risk assessment, so that new introductions are prevented and the spread of aquatic invasive species already present is controlled or reduced, with the goal of ultimately resulting in no new introductions. A new annex on climate change impacts is proposed, committing both countries to consider the impacts of climate change in the development of approaches for the achievement of the agreement's purpose and objectives. A new annex on habitats and species is proposed, committing both countries to establish a target of net habitat gain with a goal of conservation, protection, maintenance, restoration, and enhancement of the resilience of native species, habitats, and ecosystems. And finally, a new notification component is proposed, committing both countries to strengthen notification for planned facilities or activities that could have environmental effects on the waters of the Great Lakes. On behalf of Susan and myself, I'd like to thank you for attending this presentation and invite you to visit the binational.net website for further details on the proposed amendments to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement.
Thank you.